I forgot how loud that intro was, and my ears hurt. I hope everybody else is okay. Uh, we are back. This is the Watchers Digital Network, and we took an extended holiday break. Obviously, we returned last week with a new show, Cannoli Watchers, but that was a little different. We didn't have a guest on, it was just myself and JC riffing. As always, I am here. I'm Drew. I have JC with me, and we have a interesting guest, and I'm excited to talk to him. And I'm just going to kick it over to him and let him introduce himself to everybody.
Sure. I'm Dale Dobson. I'm a character actor based in the great Midwest. I love just being part of the storytelling process. I've also done some writing for like National Lampoon and Crack.com. I've done some animation on my own. I used to do a blog about early video games and that history. And these days, I'm just happy to be making movies, and I'm happy to be on the show with you guys. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, hey, no, thanks for joining us. It's our pleasure. Um, JC has a separate podcast that he does about classic video games and stuff. So that's
Very
when I
cool.
reached out to you. That was one of the things that really jumped out because I thought, if nothing else, we might be able to do some cross talk and have JC get some mic time. Because usually when we have actors and movie type shows, I kind of own the mic and I don't let them talk too much.
Yeah, I always feel like the things I love about film and video games are kind of they're this confluence of like art and technology, and if everything's working on all cylinders in both departments, that's when greatness happens. And just yeah, and I love the early history of film and video games and the way that that technology like emerges by it jumps forward by leaps and bounds in the first couple decades, and then things kind of stabilize. And I love that early experimental phase of any art form, but we can see the stuff that's happened within this past century or so.
Yeah, and then obviously, like when you go back and you just kind of even just the 70s or the 80s, and we're talking like how technology integrated into film at that point, and it looks still so vastly different than what we're getting now with,
Mm-hmm.
and especially with the emergence of AI, that like every decade you kind of have like the separate viewing experience. And I feel like in the 2000s there, everything kind of it, it got really kind of samey looking. Like,
There was CG became such a big thing that it kind of like, oh, everyone's doing this with like I used to love reading Cinefex magazine, and it stopped
oh yeah,
publishing several years ago because it reached the point where every article was, well, we used Houdini for all the particle systems and the geometry warping, and no, we used this. It was like the toolbox became very much just bespoke, like we just use this off the shelf stuff. It's been really a pleasure to see things going back toward practical effects and
man.
stop motion animation, and that the handcrafted nature of it, we lost that for a little while. And I think it's like the return to pixel art in video games in recent times. It's like
Yeah,
there's a pleasure in seeing that handcrafted feel to things. And I think the technology moves forward, but there's a point where you say we're relying too much on this technology. We've got to come back and do something that feels more organic, that is more organic. So
yeah.
Yeah, I think
I was
one of
reading
the
it. Oh, go ahead.
sorry, I was just gonna say one of the worst things from like that time period, like the early mid thousands, when they went back and they did movies.
We lost you, JC.
yeah, I can't quite hear
Uh,
you. Yeah.
yeah,
um,
sorry. Can you hear me now?
A
yeah, if
little
you
bit
lean
better, yeah.
closer, I think if you
Yeah.
lean closer, you might have just been too far away.
Yeah, maybe it might be my audio sound thing. Um, it was in the early 2000s to mid 2000s. They went back to all these movies that had practical effects and replaced them with CG, and that was like one of the worst. And you still see them on TV. Like they'll play these movies from like 2003, 2004, and you have to like go back and buy a VHS if you want the original
Oh yes,
um
yes.
practical.
we're all excited about the
Yeah.
re-release coming up of the original Star Wars, which was the
Yeah.
version
Yeah.
I saw when I was 10 years old in movie theaters, though it'll be in much better condition because I lived in a little town in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. By the time a print from the film that opened in May made it to us in October, it was so damaged that part of the trash compactor scene was just completely missing. It was like, oh, we're in trouble. Now we're fine. It was like, what happened? I had to read the novelization and then see the re-release a few years later to find out. But yeah, no, it's. I think that it's been a pleasure to see practical effects, creature suits and CG used for enhancements and for things like it's a period film. We need some cars in the background. CG is great at that because there's not a performance aspect to it as much as just establishing the world of the film. And that's great. But it's been nice to see that, yeah, everyone kind of realized we're relying on this toolkit too much and things do look a little samey, and the lighting is never quite right, no matter how well you match the film stock and the lens. And it's just you got to do things for real sometimes. Do it in camera.
Yeah, and it was kind of crazy to learn how expensive it is to shoot a period piece, getting
Yeah,
the old cars and stuff. Like
yeah,
that was wild when I learned
yeah.
just how costly that is.
One of my favorite movies is one that a lot of people haven't heard of, John Huston's Wise Blood from about 1980, adapted from the Flannery O'Connor novel. And Huston, he made Treasure of the Sierra Madre. He made lots of big films. This was a lower budget film and it was a period piece, but you can see in many shots that the vehicles close to camera are like 1940s vehicles, but in the background you'll still see like 70s Dodge Chargers and things driving around. They didn't have the money to completely render the world, the way that I'm sure he wanted to. So it was interesting to see how a really esteemed director working on a tighter budget, what compromises he chose to make. And it's one of the things I love about rewatching the film is just going, yeah, that's a vending machine from like the 70s.
But something that I've never thought about until just now is that we kind of every time we watch a film, we're kind of putting a suspension of disbelief into reality, right? We're
Yeah,
accepting the universe of the film that we're watching, and if you're watching something on stage, it's all imagination, and that suspension of
yeah.
disbelief is even that much greater. So, like,
It is. It's funny because like there was a period in the early 1900s where some theater directors were trying to go for realism. Like if they needed a forest scene, they would bring in like actual trees to the theater. And then film came along and it was just like, well, we can just put the camera in the forest. That's easy. And so then theater said, wait a second, okay, our power is the immediacy of being live, is the fact that the audience can't look away, they can't later on change the channel, etc. So theater realized that, okay, suspension of disbelief is part of the engagement that we do here. I'm doing
right,
just a one night workshop in Brooklyn next week, and it's a little black box theater. We're just performing the current version of this script, and there'll be some wardrobe, but there really won't be sets per se. And it's going to be nice to just work in that, very much, everything's in the imagination, and the audience is kind of conspiring with the actors and direction to experience the story, where
yeah,
you're not being spoon fed anything. It's just, yeah. And film when it makes use of that as well, when it plays little tricks on you or just says, if you buy this in the first reel, you're with us, and if you don't, it's streaming, go watch something else.
yeah. Well, that's what I was thinking. Like, why can't we just have that expectation when we go into a movie? Like, should we really be bothered that this film has some out of era cars in the background or a vending machine? Like Ed Wood, for instance, like his airplane cockpit was just a room and like a guy's
Yeah.
box,
Yeah, and if the story works, I mean, ideally, the thing I always think about is that if we're doing our jobs as actors, filmmakers, editors, the audience shouldn't notice those things on a first viewing. Maybe if they come back and watch it again, then they're going to go like, oh wait, those shoes changed magically from this angle to this angle. But that's sort of their reward for coming back and watching it again, is getting to
Yeah.
look past to see some of the artifice, because it is all artificial to a degree, but you're hoping it's honest and real within that. And no, I mean, I watch a lot of old movies. I love animation. There are things in many films that are not realistic. They're not even naturalistic, but if they work within the universe of the film and the story is honest to itself and the performances work, that stuff kind of shouldn't matter. At least it's fun to suspend your disbelief and just go with it, and afterwards say, what was really weird was this, but it didn't affect my enjoyment of the film. And
Yeah.
yeah, Ed Wood, he was, for as much as his reputation tends to precede him, I've seen many worse films. Like, Ed Wood had a style, he had a vision, he couldn't always execute to it, but I love great films and I love terrible films. Mediocre films are like the ones I can leave alone. I was like,
Yeah.
give me greatness, give me Fellini, or give me Ed Wood. Don't give me William Bodine. There's a pleasure in being part of the seeing what the director's going for, and then evaluating, did they succeed in achieving that, or were there limitations, and then what were the nature of those limitations? Can you tell it was budget, or it was time? Like, obviously sometimes you're just like, oh, I see what's going on here. They had to shout the dialogue because their sound recording equipment was not very precise. So
Yeah.
it gives a style to a film that you're like, that's a little weird. And then you learn why, and it's like, okay, got it.
Well, if you love terrible trash, you would love my movies, because that's what I make, and it's
I was going to
not.
say that, but I didn't want to be the one to call it that.
Well, I'd rather see a noble failure than a competent middle of the road film. That's just my style. It's like, I like to see things that I'd rather see a swing and a miss than a lob, a grounder.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not a
Well,
sports person, so my metaphors are terrible.
I like to think that nobody else in the world has made a better movie on a $200 budget using iPhones than I have made.
Yeah,
And I stand by that. For what we had, I think it's an incredible movie. But like,
yeah.
you stack it up against like other indie guys that are out there changing the world right now. Obviously it's trash, but it's
Well,
my trash.
everyone's work evolves. Like, wherever they start, it's like the things that they do well are the things that stand out, and the things that were limitations, you either say this is a great film in spite of those. Sometimes it's a great film because those constraints force you to make interesting decisions. It's like, yeah, it's a post-apocalyptic kaiju film, but we didn't have the budget to go outside, so everything you get is coming from through this little transistor radio that one character has, or
Yeah.
things that you hear. And if you find a creative way to tell a story when you can't tell it the obvious way, sometimes that's what makes a film worthwhile. You know. Anyway, we could talk about that forever, but
I think to ask
But
one thing that there's a cat here. You mentioned Flannery O'Connor, and I
yeah,
love the way that she does Southern Gothic horror.
uh-huh.
It's so great. But I wanted to ask, have you read any of her books? And if you did, do you have a favorite?
Well, I've read a few of her short stories, but mainly I've read Wise Blood, and I tracked down a copy because I love the film so much, and I was like, okay, yeah, this I love her writing. I know there was either a documentary or a biopic of her recently that I want to follow up on. The short stories I've read from one of her collections I really enjoyed. She's got, um, I don't know, I can't. Uh,
It's just different in a way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's got a unique style, and it feels very grounded, but also a little bit eccentric, which is what I think I like about her work. Um, but
I recommend Violent Bear It Away if you ever have a
oh
chance to
yes.
read that one. That's a great one.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I have, and I don't remember the name. I've got it in my on my tablet. I've got a collection of some of her short stories, and I've just kind of been periodically. I'll jump in and read one, and I'm always just like, oh yeah, she's. I like her work in some ways for the same reason I love Shirley Jackson, where it's like there's a certain style to it. There's a literary quality to it, but there's also a sense of humor and a love of strangeness that make her work sing. And it's one of those personal things where it's like, yes, I just love. It's not because of her plotting; it's because of the way her dialogue works and the way her characters are delineated. And Wise Blood is just a joy from beginning to end in print, and the film adapts that feel quite well. But anyway, that's yeah. So you guys have some specific things you wanted to ask about, talk about?
Yeah, so I have a couple of things, and I think once we kind of get through this, we can. I always like to kind of get into people's past and like what brought them to the party and stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
so at some point, I'll definitely kind of get into that. But there's a few credits that you have on IMDb that jumped out at me,
Okay.
and all right, and I'll start with A Haunting.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I
That
love that show.
it
I've
was a
watched. Yeah. I watched every marathon on Discovery ever, 13, 15 hours of my day, every day that it was on. Uh, so can you like talk about that? Like, do you
yeah,
remember much about it?
yeah. Yes, I do. It was probably it was like the second like television thing I did. It was pretty early in my time working on camera, and yeah, it was one of those things where it was like, you're kind of cast because you bear some resemblance to the real people, so they're going to cut from the interview footage to the recreation stuff and of course the ghosts. And so I submitted for it because I was like, yeah, I look enough like this guy. And as it turned out, I sounded a little bit like him. I didn't get to see footage of him before we shot it, but it worked out well. And I was just the stepfather to this young woman moving into a house. I was, where she experiences a number of entities that are apparently haunting the space, and we hold a little, not really a séance, but a kind of a cleansing ritual. It was interesting. What I remember most about it was that the we were it was set in California. We were filming it in Virginia, but they had a car with a California license plate to help sell the location. We were on the water, so that worked. The biggest thing that was a uh, kind of an introduction to me, where it was like, oh yeah, I didn't know this, but it makes perfect sense, is that behind the scenes, filming it while we were on set, we were allowed to take photos, of what was going on with ourselves and such backstage, off camera, but we weren't allowed to share anything until the episode aired. That's pretty normal. But we were specifically not allowed to take any photos of the ghosts, the wardrobe for the ghosts, the makeup process for the ghosts. They knew that was where those are the money shots, right? That's what the show
Right.
does really well and invests a lot in, is making those spooky and feel convincing. So that was where they really wanted to keep that under lock and key, and for good reason. But it was interesting. It was just one of those things where it was like, oh yeah, maybe I'd be right for this. Oh, okay, I've got to be in Virginia in the next week, and so I took the week off of work, or I actually kind of worked part time while I was down there. That was when I used to have a day job, so I had to balance things. But it was interesting because we weren't, they had already shot the interview footage. So the material that we were doing was it was more than B-roll because we did have scripted dialogue. But just the process of putting that show together, they were at the time, I don't think it's in production anymore, but they kind of had like a 2-week cycle. They would film the interviews and then get it cast and come back to that episode a few weeks later when we had the actors there and we would shoot our stuff. um it was there were just a lot of the things that I hadn't seen before because I hadn't been on a multi-day shoot for television. So it was like, oh yeah, we dressed the set to be, it's the house when they first move in, and it's dirty and dust bunnies everywhere, and then the next day they've got it all cleaned up and organized. It's like, oh, now she's been there for a while and things have changed. We had an effect that they had to do with the sink bubbling, where my character is looking at the sink and going, well, that's not good. And for what, it wasn't bubbling enough at one point, so they really loaded it up for the next take, and it just like rose up and splashed me in the face. And I was so stunned, I just was just like, all I could do was laugh. And so we weren't able to use that take either. Not that they would have, but it was one of those things where it was like, yeah. So I have anecdotes like that, but it was a good experience. It was really well run. It was television is in some ways a tighter schedule than feature films are. You've got, and it's certainly a tighter turnaround. Like between the time you film it and when it airs is usually like 4 to 8 months at most. Whereas a feature, it can be, especially an indie feature, it can be years before it sees the light of day. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that was those are really the main things I remember about working on it. Was there was a sincerity about it on the part of the production team. The script was doing its best to respect, the experiences reported by the people who, were, the real people who were featured. And we were trying to do justice to the stuff that, you needed the budget to visualize. And that's mostly the haunting. That was a complicated episode. I think there were 3 or 4, maybe 5 different apparitions, and they had like antique fabric for the dress of one of them. It just beautiful, beautiful costume work, beautiful makeup work, great lighting. And yeah, it was fun to be around and go, okay, my part, I'm not in a scene with the ghosts, but I certainly see them, getting ready to shoot that stuff.
Yeah.
um, and yeah, no, it was fun. It was like doing a mini horror movie. It really was a good experience.
Did you ever get to see the episode?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I have it in my iTunes collection, and I've got my footage from it. I still use a little bit of it in one of my reels, I think, or at least I did for several years. And yeah, no, I was happy with it. It was one of those things where occasionally I would go and see if it was like being rerun and feel like Norma Desmond for a moment.
Yeah. So I have a question about the production side of things. It's something that I've always kind of wondered with these types of shows where it cuts to interviews and stuff. So when you're shooting, are you filming like a whole scene that they end up kind of cutting?
Yeah, very
And
very
okay,
much so. What they do is they take the interviews, give them the outline of the story, and they're getting, and they're using a lot of the time the real interview audio, and we're just providing essentially illustration footage. There is scripted stuff where we're speaking and can be heard, unlike like some of the true crime shows on Oxygen and such. But um, but the way it's scripted is you're shooting it as a scene, and then yes, they'll use bits and pieces. So a lot of the time, the dialogue that is scripted is recorded, and they'll use a lot of that because that's kind of intended to be heard. But then there was a scene where we're just carrying a mattress up the stairs, and they said just improvise here. And so it was all just the usual, like, okay, whoop, watch the corner, all right, we got it. And they ended up using a fair amount of that. Um oh, that's one of the things that was interesting, is that the the place where we shot it, where we had a real house that we shot, and then we shot some stuff in a studio. And as it worked out, it was practical for us to carry the mattress that we were bringing in through the front door and up the stairs. But then rounding the corner and taking the mattress down the hall was done at the studio, with the corner at the top of the stairs dressed to match the real location. I mean, not the real, but the physical house we were in
yeah,
was set up then to match that in the studio. So it was like, so we carry it up partway up the stairs, get to the corner. 2 days later, we're in a different place, but wearing the same wardrobe, same boxes and mattress and such. And we just continue that move. And it was like watching the episode, you'd never think that was the case. I mean, that's supposed to be completely invisible, but it was an interesting little lesson in, oh yeah, sometimes, reality and the physicality of what you need for the set, is like, oh, okay, now we have to like do the, well, moving upwards like we're coming up the stairs while we're just carrying this mattress out through the hall.
That's such an interesting scene to put that much work into, too, as
Yeah,
far
and it
as
was just an illustrative moment. It was just, and in fact, we ended up cutting. Another moment that was supposed to be there where they're just like delivering the mattress to the room, and the schedule was it was a little bit behind on the last day of shooting, and they're like, "Yeah, we're just not going to do that scene." And it was like, "Yeah, you don't need that scene, but if you had needed it, for timing or the edit, it was in the script, but it ended up being like something that could be cut in favor of more critical footage, and you never want to go overtime on a union shoot or any kind of shoot where it's going to get more expensive if you go over 12 hours. That's always the driving force there. So anyway, that's
yeah.
the most I've talked about that, but it's been long enough that I think it's safe to do so.
Yeah, no, man, I love that show. Like I said, I just found it on Tubi or something the other day, and I have just been waiting for a day that I could just beginning to end just run through that thing. It
Hmm.
was it was so fun just to have it on in the background as my background
Yeah.
noise.
Yeah, I was in like season 10, season 11, an episode called Grave Awakenings. It was a lot of fun to do. It was but I don't know how much longer the show lived after that. I think it was maybe a couple more seasons afterwards, and I don't think it's in production anymore. But definitely a show that like a lot of people I run into have seen it, and they may probably haven't seen my episode, or if they did, they wouldn't remember me from it necessarily. But it was fun to do. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've watched it so much now that we've interacted. I bet I'll be able to go back and be like, "Oh, there it is. That's the episode."
Yep, yep.
But so moving on to something that I actually haven't seen yet. But I was late to the Tim Robinson train.
Ah,
I'm willing to admit, but since get jumping on the train, uh, his brilliance is, in my opinion, unmatched. Like I have been floored at everything that I've seen, and so I haven't watched Detroiters yet, but it's the last Tim Robinson project that I have yet to watch. And I saw that you have an episode of Detroiters, so I
yeah,
thought I'd kind of ask about that.
yeah. I mean, Detroiters is a show that was, it grew out of, the it really comes out of the friendship of Tim Robinson and Sam Richardson, and it's a very, it's a very Detroit centric comedy. Like a lot of what's in it are kind of in jokes, so it's really appreciated here. Where everyone in Southeast Michigan is really happy it lasted a couple seasons, um, and it's funny and it's warm. It in some ways it shares. It was a bit of a forerunner to Ted Lasso. A lot of the same creative team, Jason Sudeikis was involved with Detroiters, and certainly,
Oh wow.
yeah, he was one of the producers on it, I believe, and some of the same directors and writers. So there's some shared DNA, but yeah, it was very specific. The episode I was in is centered around Little Caesars, which is a pizza company based in Detroit.
Mhm.
The Illich family around
My
here is, they brought Second City to Detroit, and so it's like Detroit has an improv community that Tim and Sam came out of. Um, they, have continued to work together. I know Sam's been on I Think You Should Leave, and Shantae Dolan, who played Chrissy Cramblin on Detroiters, Tim Robinson's character's wife in the show. She has continued to work with him. She's been on I Think You Should Leave, and I believe she's in the Chair Company. And I've done a couple films with her because she comes back to Detroit, and she's been writing and directing some stuff around here. So Detroiters, there's a lot of Detroit DNA in it. And I was just I'm billed. Well, I actually wasn't credited. I was Furious Man on the call sheet, and I didn't have any lines except Sam Richardson dubbed in a line. I think it was Sam. It sounds like his voice. I'm just seen peeking through the slats of a blind, and I didn't have a line scripted, but they were compressing the scene a bit in the edit. So it's like I'm going, whose voice is that? Man, that sounds like Sam Richardson. But I've never been able to verify that. But yeah, it was just a fun little scene, and it was we shot a couple different versions of it, and I think they chose the funniest one to use in the episode. And yeah, that was the first like real television thing, and it was the first time I did comedy on camera. And I remember thinking at the time like, this must not be working because nobody's laughing, and then it's cut and everybody laughs, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is film. This is not what I'm used to for comedy, especially comedy that's got a degree of improvisation to it, which Detroiters did have. So yeah, check it out. It's well worth watching. I think you can see the genesis of not only some of Tim's work like I Think You Should Leave, but also some of his more recent feature work like was it Friendship is the name? I forget the name of
Yeah,
the film.
Friendship.
Yeah, some of the heart that's in that you can see, peeking through a little bit through his persona in Detroiters. But yeah, his style is, everyone's glad he's found his groove after they didn't know what to do with him on SNL years ago, and then
Yeah, yeah.
I remember I was doing a play in downtown Detroit in early 2017, and I was driving down to the theater, and I just saw Tim and Sam walking down the street, and I was like, oh yeah, they actually are friends in real life. It was like, oh yeah, that's right. I was like, is there a camera? Oh no, 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 they're just like actual buddies. So that was I think a lot of what made the show work. And it's uneven like any comedy, and it may not be to everyone's taste, but I think I was really glad I got to do a little, contribute a little tiny bit to it. And there's definitely a generation of filmmakers that when they look at my reels, they're like, "You worked with Tim Robinson." I'm like, "Well, yeah, I worked mostly with his stand-in, and then we did the actual scene, and I got to work with him and shake his hand and say hello afterwards." But it was a very, it was a very very quick bit, but I'm proud of it. I'm glad I got to work on it.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. Especially because like his star is just continuing to rise now.
Yeah,
It's cool that you
yeah,
have
no,
that.
he makes me think of like some of the great old comedy, actor legends like, Edgar Kennedy back in the Little Rascals, Our Gang and Three Stooges days, and Emil Sitka, and like there are very few comedy actors today who kind of are able to say, I've got this character type, but it's very versatile. I can do a lot of different things within this, but you also feel a certain satisfaction when he gets to a certain point in a lot of the characters he plays where it's like, yeah, that's what he does brilliantly. And you don't see that so much anymore. So
Yeah,
it's nice to see him being recognized and applauded for the kinds of work that he does.
yeah. No, I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to watch it. As somebody who has never been to Detroit, I love Detroit culture and stuff. As you can see here, I got my Lions hoodie
Yeah,
on.
very
Uh,
cool.
yeah. So that's just like I think I'll probably get a lot of those jokes and whatnot, and um, I'll move on. 'Cause I don't want to take all of the time talking about how awesome Tim Robinson is. Uh, I noticed that you are now. Is this the actual Power Rangers that you're?
No, this is a fan series that
Okay.
so well here's what's happened is that Hasbro owns the kind of the American presence of the Power Rangers, the Super Sentai, and they there have been a few series of the show where they were like, we're not bringing this to the United States. Like the one I worked on was based on a series, I don't remember the name, but we called it Rail Riders here, and it was very train centric because in Japan trains are a big part of pop culture. In the US, like, we think of trains like in entertainment, like it doesn't age past Thomas the Tank Engine. So it was like, this is available, but they did it the way that the adaptations have always been in the US. It's like you use the fight footage from the original, and then you use some American actors to tell to reshoot all the dialogue stuff. What was really fun about it, and I don't usually like to do fan series because you don't own the IP, you can't really do anything with them past a certain point. You can put them on YouTube. But what I loved about that series was it recognized the excesses of the tokusatsu genre, and it had fun with it. It was a little subversive, it was a little silly, and in a good way. So it was, and some of the fighting is quite good, and some of it is, should have been shot from a different angle maybe, but it was really fun to work on. And that team has continued to move forward. They're working on a new series now. They've got more of a budget to work with. More, they're just like, they love that genre. I was a little, I was, when Power Rangers debuted in the U.S., my memories of it at the time were reading in the Wall Street Journal about how they didn't bring enough toys in and retailers were concerned. So I was like, yeah, little age past it, but I love Ultraman and Spectre Man and Space Sheriff Gavan, which is on Tubi now, and I've been watching and loving. So I was like, yeah, I'm into, this, it was something I wanted to be involved in. And when I saw the script and the character, I was like, okay, this one I've avoided fan series of fan films of for the most part, even ones where it's like, oh, I love Star Wars, but I just don't think I can do this. But that one was like, yeah, okay, I will happily come and play the train conductor and have fun. And it's fun to watch. It's pretty well made, and yeah, especially like we always hear from kids. We did an appearance with the cast and director and crew at the YumaCon, which is an anime fest convention that happens in Detroit every year. And a couple of years ago, we did a panel about rail riders, and we had an audience there that was like, okay, they actually have some interesting questions about it. So it was a fan series, but kind of quasi legit, just because officially it was not going to get adapted for this market. So doesn't mean that they don't have to worry about like copyright strikes when they upload it to YouTube and it's like, you're using too much footage from the original. We can recognize that. So they've
Yeah.
had to live with, work around those constraints. But yeah, it was fun. It was just interesting to do that kind of a project. And if I get to do something bigger budget and union approved someday, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, no, that's cool. One, I agree with the fan film thing. It really depends on the project, even if like I'll watch it, like much less like you said, work on it. Like one, I can't remember the name of it, but it was a Friday the 13th one, and it actually made it onto the box set of the Scream Factory release
Oh,
of
nice,
the
nice.
entire franchise, and so that's cool. It's almost kind of like unofficially official,
Yeah,
but
I think there's a I mean, Star Wars was a Flash Gordon fan film kind of, to start with. It was like, I can't get the rights to Flash
yeah,
Gordon, so here's what I'm going to do. And I think that when people are talented filmmakers and they just have a passion to tell a story in someone else's fictional universe, it's like, as long as you're upfront about, yeah, this is a fan series, this is not, authorized, and as long as you don't get in, copyright, or other legal issues, I think fan films have kind of become part of the fabric of how we celebrate popular culture. And I think studios have kind of recognized that yeah, there's a if someone's monetizing something, maybe we need to step in and but they've kind of come to accept that, like, as long as it's clear that it's not official,
yeah,
there's room for it. I know there was a Jumanji kind of little short sort of prequel that started as a fan film and became well, I guess I'm not certain about that, but it feels like it was made, on a very low budget, but it became part of the Jumanji, one of the disc releases. So sometimes that happens, but it has to be made with quality and with affection and with respect for the property. And that's one of those things that it's a tough zone to strike. Sometimes, yeah, you see, I got a script. I don't even remember what the property was, but I once got a script sent to me. Someone was interested in having me work on a fan film, and I looked at it and I'm just like, this is not. I just, yeah, I don't want to. invest the effort to be involved with this. And it was one of those where it was like it felt like I wasn't really right for the part they were offering me. It was just, yeah. So it's something I've always been a little queasy about. But Rail Riders, I'm proud of it. Our director, writer, production team were working really hard to make it decent, and I've seen them take big quality steps forward with their subsequent efforts, and that's always rewarding to see. I'm always happy to work with someone when I can see them, where they are today and where they might be down the road, because maybe, we'll cross paths again, and I know that there's someone I'd love to work with again. That's part of the joy of this work, is finding your tribe, finding the people that you're like, yeah, I want to work, whatever you've got, it's always a pleasure to go to set and work with someone you enjoy working with, and have some faith that, you pretty good idea, confidence that it's going to turn out, well.
Yeah, as far as that tribe thing goes, I always like to bring up like this podcast specifically. Like we've met so many cool people from film and specifically the horror community that
Mhm.
like just feels like a tribe and everybody's all on the same page and it's all about just kind of working together and
Yeah, yeah. No,
that's
some of my favorite people I've met have been makeup effects artists that I've worked with on often multiple projects, which will, it's a small world, right? We'll continue to cross paths, and just, having people where it's like, oh yeah, yeah, you did a great, age up makeup on me, and oh wait, now you need to do a life cast of my head so it can be, destroyed. Great, like you, I know I'm in good hands. I know I can, trust what you're doing, and that it's gonna look great, and it'll be worth, the any discomfort, which there wasn't as it turned out. But it was the first time I'd done that, and it was like, oh, okay, here we go. But anyway, it's always a pleasure to work with people who are dedicated and who love. I love genre pictures. Horror and comedy are my favorites. I was really glad to work on a film called Haunted Heist about a year ago, which was my SAG AFTRA must join. It was my third strike. It was the film where I had to join the union, and I was so glad that it was horror. It was a horror comedy, and I'm like, this is good, because if I'd had to join the union because I was like playing a doctor who sticks his head in and says everything's looking fine, Mr. Johnson, I would have been like, oh, that was not the one I wanted to cross that line with. Haunted Heist was like, it was working with King Batch and Lil Rel Howery directing and Tiffany Haddish. It was just like, okay, this is a film that I'm like, this is worth, biting the bullet and making the transition, and it's been fine. So
yeah.
hopefully that'll be out soon. I got a few horror pictures coming up. So
That's that's awesome. That's definitely my mainline interest, and it has kind of always been horror. Like that's kind of how this iteration of our show started. Was doing what we called horror watchers, where we talk to people strictly in like the horror movie scenes and whatnot. And
mhm.
I've loved expanding and talking about other things too. But yeah, I'm just very horror centric.
Yeah, no, I love horror. I grew up reading, Famous Monsters magazine as a kid. I'm still trying to track down some of the films I read about at that time, where often I was too young to see them. And it was like, okay, someday I'm going to find this. Oh man, this movie Mausoleum has to be great. They've covered it twice in the magazine. And then I see the movie and I'm like, and I think Forey Ackerman was just like really fond of Bobby Brzee, and that's why they covered it so much, because the,
I like
the description of this effect in print was like, had me as a kid like, oh man, I can't wait to see this, and then I finally saw it and I'm like, this is not what I was led to expect.
yeah, I like Mausoleum though. The Vinegar Syndrome release is
Yes, the
really
Vinegar
good.
Syndrome rest. I'm so glad Vinegar Syndrome is restoring so many of these. So that was the first time I got to see it, was when the Vinegar Syndrome restoration came out. And I know I appreciated it for what it was. It was just like there were scenes that were described in print as like being amazingly gory, and then I see them and I'm like, okay, I understand how this
Yeah,
effect was accomplished. It's not as dramatic as what the magazine was kind of leading me to believe. But that was always the nature of, those magazines were there to hype the upcoming projects. And, I mean, I read about The Changeling, finally got to see it about 5 years ago. And it's one of my favorite supernatural, horror. It's not even horror, really. It's a mystery. It's a thriller, but it's very spooky. I love so many things within the horror genre, and when you can successfully mix horror and comedy, which isn't always easy, that's always a big win for my interest. So
Yeah, absolutely. But before we run out of time, I do.
oh
I
yeah.
want to ask. I want to ask, like, so, what brought you to this world of acting?
Yeah, that's a good question. The for me it grew out of, I think, really just a love of storytelling. My mom always has stories about like storybooks that she would read to me, and I was obviously really into the stakes of, was Winnie the Pooh going to make it out of the honey tree after he filled up a little too much, like that kind of stuff was always like something that I loved. And when I was a child, I was too shy to be an actor, so I did puppetry and I did magic tricks and I did, all these things that were kind of like 1 degree removed, but were still letting me perform and tell stories. And then in junior high school, I had some friends who got my sense of humor. And by the time I got to high school, I was, had friends, on the student council who were like, "Can you MC this pep assembly?" And that really pulled me out of my shell in that way. And then in college, I had, theater professors and directors who really gave, and in late high school too, people who really gave me permission to take the work seriously and to be like, oh yeah, this isn't, this is rehearsal, this isn't play practice, this is, this is a serious thing that we're doing. This is
Yeah.
storytelling is fundamentally human. I think that's really what I love about it, is like the technology has changed, but so much of what we do is the same as our remote ancestry, sitting around the campfire at the end of the day and telling a story of the day's hunting and gathering, and telling a funny story about something that happened generations ago. And the story probably doesn't bear any resemblance to what actually happened anymore, but it's been refined and it's funnier and it's sharper. And it's how we communicate morals to each other. It's how we entertain each other. It's how we document what it is to be human. And I think that fundamentally is what I love, because I've done storytelling in other media, but I found that when I was doing stuff solo, like when I was writing or animating stuff on my own, more or less, it was not as rewarding as collaborating with other artists to do theater and film. And that's really the joy of it for me, is telling stories and being part of the process and just seeing how it comes together, and what am I bringing to, what can I bring collaboratively to the process. And I love, just you know being part of that and sharing that with like young directors, young actors. I work with a lot of film students. I work with a lot of acting students, just to talk about, and new actors, even like people my age. It's like talking about the craft. And you know I guess my big heresy as far as acting goes is that I'm very much focused. I mean, naturalism's a goal, but if your performance is so internalized that an audience can't tell what you're thinking or feeling, then you're not telling the story. It's like there's a little, even on film, even in an extreme close up, there's a little bit of theatricality to being the character, because you're communicating to an audience. If you're so inward that you're not even, I'm not saying you should be aware there's an audience, but you've the work you're doing is for an audience. And that's probably my coming from my hybrid of theater and film work, that I see. Yeah, there are times where your timing on a reaction is probably a little bit longer than it might be in reality, because the audience needs to see what's going on in your head for that split second. And that's part, and I've learned some of that from animation too, right? Sometimes you hold a moment, a keyframe for a couple frames longer, and it makes the joke work. And it's a weird alchemy, but it's part of the process. And I've worked with directors who come from a visual effects animation background, and I'm always like, look guys, if you want to talk in terms of holds and keyframes for timing on this moment, I know what you're talking about. We can work that way. And we've done that a few times, where it was like, just give like a you know a 1 frame, a 2 frame glance. It's like, okay, it's gonna take me a few tries to get it that fast, but okay, I'm gonna try it again. Okay, we got it. We got it. All right.
So what project has been like the most fulfilling for you?
I usually say, whatever I'm the thing that I'm most excited about usually is like the next thing that I'm doing. But I've been doing this long enough now that I did a great low budget film in Texas years ago called The Wasps, that was an adaptation of a classical Greek comedy by Aristophanes. It's like the fourth oldest comedy script known to humankind. And the film is set in ancient Greece. It has a lot of comedy footnotes to explain what's going on. It's shot in black and white. Well, it was shot in color, but graded to black and white. It's a 4:3 aspect ratio. It's one of only a couple lead performances I've had in features. Richard Linklater was our executive producer, so we had a little bit of
Okay.
Austin cred there, and it's just been working its way across. It's been showing in Texas quite a bit. I got to see it finally with an audience. I mean, I'd seen it, as a cast member, but I got to see it with an audience at the Philadelphia Museum of Contemporary Art last fall, and it was such a pleasure to go. Okay, this actually works with a real audience. Like people have paid to see this and are enjoying it. So it's one of those films that is very unique and very special to me because my first professional acting gig really was an Aristophanes comedy, a production of The Birds on stage 25 years ago. So part of my DNA, my theater background is like that was one of those where it's like, if I don't do this film, what am I doing? Like, this is what I love. And then the fact that it turned out well and the letterboxd reviews have been really strong for the few people who've gotten to see it because it's not in wide distribution yet. But that's one that was very fulfilling that I'm very proud of. And I hope it finds its audience eventually. I know it's going to be a niche audience. This isn't going to be like, your father-in-law's favorite movie to watch after Caddyshack or anything, but it's a very special film to me. But everything I get to work on is something I appreciate, and I'm always proud of, at least the effort we've put into something. Even if a film doesn't turn out great, it's still, there's still the love is usually still there, visible on screen. Recent releases, a sports comedy called Bulls, I'm really happy with, came out in January on the various streaming platforms. I've got a kind of an 80s punk film called Neutrals that I just got to the cast and crew screening of several weeks ago. I'm looking forward to that one finding an audience. Couple horror pictures, Dormant Evil, I got to see cast and crew screening. Hopefully it's hitting distribution this year sometime. Squatch, which is a Bigfoot movie that is hitting Blu-ray and VOD in, I think, March 10th is the date that's coming up. I mean, there's a lot. I've been happy to say that a lot of what I've gotten to work on, I'm proud of. Or at least there are moments that I love. Don't Get Eaten, the family-friendly zombie comedy that is out on Tubi and other platforms. That one was very special. It's got a lot of heart. It's one of those low-budget films where it's like, okay, yeah, this story actually works, and it's genuinely funny and genuinely heartfelt. But these are films that you wouldn't know about unless you go and look at, I mean, unless you looking at my work specifically, or you're just, browsing Tubi and you're like, okay, I don't know what this is. I got to see this.
That's how I find movies.
Yeah.
I
Oh, yeah.
spend most of my time on Tubi.
Yeah. Me,
Uh,
me too. Tubi always seems to come up with something in my recommended list where I'm like, I spent like 20 years trying to find this at video rental stores when that was a thing that existed. And somehow they have it and they know I've wanted to see this forever and I'm going to watch it right now. And even if it's terrible, I'm like, I'm glad I got to see it and I'm glad I didn't spend $15 on a DVD.
yeah. Well, I mean, they're even more expensive now with all the boutiques. A lot of these movies that I'm
Yeah.
watching on Tubi right now cost like 60, $70,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
which
Yeah.
I'm
No,
totally okay with because I'm a physical media
yeah.
collector. But
Me too. I've got, bunch of stuff right here. Bunch of I'm a big animation fan, so I have a big stack of. But I get stuff from boutique publishers like Deaf Crocodile and Thunderbean, and I just
Yeah, yeah.
love what we're seeing with restorations of everything. The work Vinegar Syndrome does. There's just been such a love for cinema that now we have preserved in digital form. I always talk about it's wonderful to see these films looking better than they would have ever looked in a movie theater. When you went to the
Yeah.
drive-in, those prints had been circulating for a bit. There were splices and scratches and damage, and you see them on like even very obscure like trucker movies from the 70s. I find them on Tubi, and it's like sometimes there are some like emulsion scratches in the opening credits, but for the most part these films look great. I mean, as good as they can. They've preserved. If it was shot on 16 millimeter, but man, it still looks pretty good on an HD, set. It's wonderful that these films exist and have gotten a digital remaster, because now they'll be around, at least as long as humanity is around.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Uh, JC, do you want to do some video game stuff before time's up?
I'll keep it short, because I actually I'm going to invite him onto the tech podcast so we can further discuss some of the retro tech and gaming. But let me pull up my list here real quick. Look at some of your reviews, and there were some games on there that are some of my favorites. You had Karnov,
Yep.
Castle of Horrors, Magician Lore, and you even did a VR game, Dead Secret.
Yes. That was a really nice hybrid of like what I love. Like I love old text adventures. I still play those sometimes, and point and click adventures. Playing that kind of a game in VR was really fun, because it was like, oh, I'm actually kind of like I'm doing those kinds of like puzzles of like object, inventory puzzles, but I feel like I'm in a space. And when something spooky happens, VR in particular can be very effective. We could talk for quite a bit about that, but I've really come to appreciate what VR can do in the horror genre, because the software, the designer can know where you've been looking, and so you can like look at a blank wall and then go look around at something else. Then when you turn back to that same wall, now there's a message written in blood on it, and the ability of the software to change the world in response to what you're not even actions you're taking, but just what you're looking at, is so good for horror. And things like when the lights go out in a VR game, it feels like the lights have really gone out. And when something glowing and spooky comes at you in the dark, it's very visceral. Like your lizard brain is in charge. Even though up here, it's computer graphics, your fight or flight response is going, holy, I got to get out of here. There are times where you're just like, okay, that's enough.
Yeah, there's some great horror VR. There's it's called Madison VR. It's like a psychological kind of
Oh,
one.
I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, you
I'll have
should
to
check that
I'll
one
have
out.
to
It's
look it
good.
up.
But
Yeah,
I
I
saw you did you had a lot of the text adventure on there, and
yep.
I actually at one point was trying to program like an original text-based adventure. Not as easy as it sounds. There's a lot of if, then, and or statements, and they get all mixed up. Everything.
Yeah, I'll tell you,
Um,
if you want to code an adventure, a text adventure, the inform language is really good to use. It's very, and especially the more recent versions are very kind of natural language friendly. They're very much about letting you set up, the description and the mapping connections and the logic in a way that feels a little more intuitive. But yeah, but look, I programmed adventure games back in the late 70s the same way, where it's
yeah.
like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to make an engine for this, but I'm going to try to write it that way with logic. And the game I wrote, it was called Skid Row Adventure, and it was very unfair because there was one maze that you actually couldn't complete or get out of because I had played an adventure game where I concluded that must be the problem, is that there's no way to map this maze. And so I just put the same construct into my game, thinking like, well, I guess that's something we do in adventure games.
I recently actually did make an ASCII art dungeon crawler.
Okay, yeah.
It's I haven't done anything. I haven't published it really yet, but I'll have to share it with you just so you can check it
Yeah,
out.
for sure.
But I was impressed that your reviews, because they were in depth. And it looks like you were completing all of them or most of them.
I try to, yeah, generally I wouldn't write a game up if I hadn't been able to complete it because I felt like it was sort of, for my way of thinking, it was like if I haven't experienced, like video games and computer games are an experiential art to me. Like my
Absolutely.
experience of playing it is likely to be different from someone else's experience. So my goal was really to document what my experience of the game was, including the dead ends and the bugs that I found. The text adventures were great for that because they're relatively simple. They're relatively short, and if they're not mean spiritedly unfair, you can solve them fairly quickly. Um, but yeah, that was sort of my, like, there were definitely games I played and was like, I'm not making headway here, so they never got written up.
Yeah. Okay. Um, like I said, we'll have to have you on the Tip podcast.
Yeah, please,
Right
please.
there.
That would be
It's
a great way to dig into that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll pass it back through, but I think we have minutes left. If you have anything you want to promote, now's your chance. Floor's
Yeah,
yours.
yeah. I mean, I mentioned Squatch coming out March 10th, especially if you're into Bigfoot films. It does a few things that I think are kind of fresh, and it's well made. I enjoyed working on it. I had a fun supporting role that caused me to conjure up a lot of my cousins in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Um, Haunted Heist should be hitting. It's a comedy, and it's probably not to everyone's taste, but there are moments in it that I think work quite well. I had fun working on my little tiny bit of it. Um, I'm doing a play. If any of I don't know when will this episode drop? Probably not before I'm doing the play in like a week in New York.
Oh,
So
I
that'll
can have the episode up tomorrow, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if anyone watching is in New York and wants to see an interesting work in progress performance, we're at the Vino Theater in Brooklyn on one night only, Wednesday, February 25th. So please come out and see us if you're of a mind to. The play is called Baby Boy by Edward Teddy Hall and Martin Challenor. We've got a good cast. It's a really interesting, dark drama that I'm playing a character I feel like I have to wash off at the end of the day, but that's an interesting challenge sometimes. And yeah, recent stuff. Bulls, the darts comedy is a lot of fun. There's a lot of stuff out there. If you look up my IMDb, Dale Dobson, you can dig into a lot of that stuff's available. Sometimes they're short films you can find on YouTube. Sometimes they've made it to Tubi. Sometimes they're still in the Amazon Prime iTunes space. A film I worked on a few years ago it's a short film called The Last Role of Charles LeBlanc, was nominated, didn't win, but it was honored to have the nomination at the Film Threat Award this ceremony last month. That's on iTunes. I don't think it might be on YouTube as well, but it's like rent to watch. It's not free anywhere yet. And there's one more film that's stuck in my Boiling Point. We played at the Genre Blast Festival last fall, and I ended up winning the Best Actor in a Short Film award. It's not anywhere you can see it yet, and it's not the same as the better known Boiling Point, but it's one I'm really proud of. Nathan Gallagher directed that, and that's one to check out if someday if you run across it. Oh, one more. Close Encounter, a UFO short. It's available on YouTube, and we shot it. It was an interesting. We shot it in like a volume space with like big LED screens too, because it was all set in a van. So we needed the reflections on the glass and the metal to look real. And so we had the Unreal sets for some things. We just had like canned footage for other background things. But it's a fun little story, and I was really proud of that one. But I'm I always say I'm one of those actors who I'm in a lot of stuff that I'm proud of, but you probably, haven't seen me in anything that you've just casually run across. And I kind of appreciate where I am because I'm able to keep busy, but there's no one on the street going, "Hey, Dobson, do that line from that movie you were in 20 years ago."
Not yet. Not yet.
Not yet, yes. But it was a real pleasure to talk to you guys. Thank you for having me on.
No, absolutely. This was a blast. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, everyone needs to get off their asses and go that way. And extra your fingers and your eyes and watch.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
guys have a lot of stuff to watch, and I appreciate your time and support here. So
Yeah, absolutely. And as soon as the Wasps hits a screen anywhere near me, I'm gonna check it out. I was
check
on
it out.
Fandango. I tried. It's nothing is anywhere near me right now.
It is just we opened the San Antonio Film Festival last year. We've played twice at the Austin Film Society. It's like mostly been Texas centric, but I was glad to see it in Philly. I was shooting a film in New Jersey, and I wrapped just in time that day to get over to the museum and see the film with an audience. And I was so glad I did. And it's one of those I think eventually it'll find its way to some channel where it can be seen, but it's it's not the easiest sell to distributors. It's like it's a faithful adaptation more or less of a 2,400-year-old Greek comedy, but it's in English. It's a musical. No, it's like, it's a weird film, but I'm proud of it. And thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, no, hey, thanks for joining us. Okay, JC, you want to go ahead and hit the outro?
Yeah.
This is probably equally as loud if you want to protect your ears, but you also can just, duck out if you want to.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, guys.
The preceding program has been brought to you by the Watchers Podcast Network. If you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends to help grow our network. Check us out on all social media platforms, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, thanks for your support.